In my job, often I'm speaking with people that have only realised that they hold a visa once it gets cancelled. Recently, I was speaking on an AVL with a prisoner who was a New Zealander and didn't realise that not only did they have a visa for Australia, but their visa had actually been cancelled. So it was really great that they came to Legal Aid and got some advice.
Welcome to Law for Community Workers. The episode you're about to listen to was recorded for our other podcast, Law Matters for People in Prison. And we thought the topic would also be helpful for community workers or support workers who help people in prison. Before we start, I would like to acknowledge that we are recording today on Gadigal land, and I pay my respects to elders past and present. It always was and always will be Aboriginal land. My name is Natalie. I'm from the Community Legal Education team at Legal Aid New South Wales. I'm very excited today to be joined by Cheka, who's a lawyer in the immigration team at Legal Aid New South Wales. Cheka, can you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Thanks, Natalie. That's right. I'm a lawyer in Legal Aid's immigration team. We're a specialist team that provides free and confidential legal advice to prisoners who have a problem with their visa.
We're talking about visa cancellation. What exactly does that mean?
So a visa cancellation is a decision by the Department of Home Affairs. Often that decision can be made because of a person's criminal history or a sentence they've received from a court. It's important to know that a sentence of a term of imprisonment of 12 months or more will mean that your visa is mandatorily cancelled, even if the Department of Home Affairs hasn't told you yet.
Who does this affect? Who's affected by visa cancellations?
So visa cancellation can affect anyone with a visa, and that includes a permanent visa. If you don't have Australian citizenship and are not an Australian citizen, you might be a permanent resident. But even if you're a permanent resident, you can still have your visa cancelled.
So is it any type of visa, like student visa, partner visa, any?
That's right, yeah. Skilled work visa, student visa, partner visa. Even if you came here as a child and were included on your parents' or another family member's visa, that is a visa that could potentially be cancelled.
So for visa cancellation, it's not necessarily that the person is in prison. They could be in the community but still have their visa cancelled.
That's right. Mandatory cancellation affects prisoners most severely because those sentenced with the term of imprisonment of 12 months or more must have their visa cancelled. But there are a number of discretionary powers that allow the Minister for Home Affairs to cancel people's visas, and that can encompass people in a lot of situations, not just prisoners.
And how exactly does the visa cancellation happen?
So you'll get a letter from the Department of Home Affairs and Immigration. It's important to look out for that letter. It can arrive in prison at any time, and a physical paper copy will be handed to you by a prison officer.
And if somebody does get that letter, what do they do?
That letter will include a 4-page form. That's called the revocation request. Basically, the revocation request is your way of requesting your visa back. If your visa's been cancelled, you need to ask the Department of Home Affairs to give you your visa back and provide reasons why you want your visa back.
Okay, so that's the important form to fill in. In a lot of legal matters, there are these very strict time limits. Is that the case here as well?
That's right. In visa matters, the time limits are perhaps stricter than any other type of matter. You only have 28 days to submit that revocation request form. And after that 28 days have finished, there's no option to get more time. So that's why it's really important that you submit your revocation request form on time.
Cheka, if you have one key message for people listening today who are in prison and might be on a visa, what would your key message be?
It's definitely the time limits. It's critically important that you submit that revocation request within the 28 days. And that's simply because the consequences for not doing so could be really severe for you. If you don't get this visa back, you will be unable to apply for any other visas, and it might mean going back to your country of citizenship.
Thanks, Cheka. We've heard that the key message for people in prison, if they've had their visa cancelled, is to get that revocation form in within 28 days. If a community worker or support worker is listening today, what would be your key message for them?
Certainly top of mind is the 28-day time limit. But if prisoners are in contact with community workers like disability support workers, counsellors, psychologists, family violence workers, those workers might hold some really important documentation like medical reports and letters of support that could really help that prisoner. We would encourage community workers to get their clients' consent to refer them to Legal Aid. You can find the Legal Aid immigration team contact details on our website.
Thanks, Checker. To finish off, I am going to ask you some quick fire, true or false questions. Okay. If a person gets a sentence of 12 months or more, their visa must be cancelled. True or false?
That's true. 12 months or more is what we call a mandatory visa cancellation. That's when you know your visa will definitely be cancelled, but your visa could also be cancelled if you've received a sentence of less than 12 months imprisonment or a non-custodial sentence.
If a person gets their criminal sentence reduced on appeal, they get their visa back. True or false?
That's false. Unfortunately, successful appeals do not mean that you automatically get your visa back. However, successful appeals will strengthen your request for your visa back.
People whose visas are cancelled in prison will be told within 6 months.
No, that's false. Unfortunately, there's no way of knowing when you'll get your letter from Home Affairs telling you that your visa's been cancelled. It could be handed to you any day that you're in prison.
New Zealanders can be affected by visa cancellation. True or false?
That's true. A lot of New Zealanders might also be dual citizens of Australia, but any New Zealander living in Australia that's not an Australian citizen can have their visa cancelled.
And finally, a person should wait to speak to Legal Aid before submitting their forms or appealing. True or false?
That's false. We would always recommend that you prioritise getting in your forms on time. You can always speak to a Legal Aid lawyer later because you can always provide more information to the Department of Home Affairs later.
And speaking of contacting Legal Aid, how do people do this?
So you can always request a free and confidential legal advice appointment with Legal Aid, and you can do that by using the prison cattle phone system and pressing #2 and asking for the immigration team.
Thanks so much for your time today, Checker.
Thank you, Nellie.
I hope that people learnt something useful today, either for yourselves or people you know who are on a visa. Thanks again for joining us.